the office is being redone. I couldn't find a hole punch. So my son is all over the place. So if it is all over the place, then that's my excuse and it's out of the way now. Oh, Almighty God, touch my lips of clay, my poor lisping tongue, that we may hear more than just my words, that we all may be inspired by your Holy Scripture and your Holy Spirit. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, I want to look at some of the scriptural texts in a little detail before I get on to the theme. Now, the texts generally inspire my theme, and it's usually obvious where their inspiration comes, but that's not always the case. Sometimes when you read the texts, a subject which seems disconnected is what comes to you when you're writing the sermon. And remember, you have to balance the fact that you have the texts, you also have the feast day, you have the occasion, if you like, and it's St. Anthony. Now, St. Anthony was famous as the founder of monasticism, who went out into the desert. He was born a rich person, became very, very wealthy when his parents died, when he was still a relatively young man. But basically he said, I have seen a pearl beyond price, and he went after the pearl beyond price. He sold all his belongings, he went into the desert, and he spent the rest of his life living a very austere life, but a life which was extraordinarily abundant and rich. And towards the end of his life, he was pestered by people seeking him out for a word. They wanted a word from the great man, the great wise old man. And this man had spent his entire life battling temptations, which he knew were distractions. It's like when you get floaters in your eye. You know what I mean? When you're trying to look at a view, and anybody over the age of about 25 probably gets them, you know? There's these weird little dots floating around and distracting you inside your eye, you know? And the older you get, the more you get, till eventually it's like a snow globe. Well, Anthony saw those purely physical things as temptations, and he fought them because he didn't want them, yet they kept popping up. It wasn't that secretly he did want them, and that they were a part of his innate water. Well, here, Elijah is being asked to get food from a widow in this Canaanite city. Now, that's not only peculiar because it's a Canaanite city, but also because a widow was so poor she was approaching starvation. The widow had nothing but a tiny bit of oil and a tiny bit of flour in order to feed her and her son. And she says, we will eat this and then we will die. And yet Elijah turns up expecting food from her. God directs him to go where there seems to be nothing, and what little there is impure, in order to find sustenance, in order to learn from what he will have been brought up to believe is beyond the scope of God's redemption and God's glory. So he goes there and he finds not just food, but food beyond abundance. Because the food he finds, a little bit of oil and a little bit of flour, continues without ceasing, an miracle. And he proclaims it, that you will not starve because this flour will never end and this oil will never end. And it becomes a miracle, it becomes a metaphor. It becomes a metaphor for what the woman at the well asks about Jesus. What is this water that I may drink, that I'll never be thirsty again, this food, that I'll never be hungry again? Well, Elijah knew about it. The woman at the well craved it. Jesus gave it. God is the fount of it, and God dressed in human form brought it forward. It is miraculous, and it is holy, and it is found in God. It is not found in anything else. We cannot provide it for ourselves. Anything that we may seek to buy with money will run out. Anything that we seek to store up will ultimately be eaten away by the moth, as Scripture has it. There are so many references in Scripture to the futility of building up physical things. And it always points to the same thing. The danger of all those things is that they do distract us. They're like shiny toys. They are enjoyable They can carry us on for a bit. When something new comes from eBay, I'm jumping about like a little boy wondering which it is. Whoa, what's that? It's usually something tawdry and embarrassing, you know, it's a bone china cup and saucer or something. It's not like I'm spending thousands of dollars, but still, it's distracting. And after the event, I don't want that. That's not what I want. That's not what I built my life on. I have not built my life that I may be like my great-grandmother and sat in a front parlour surrounded by doilies and bone china. What I really crave is St. Anthony's. I crave St. Anthony's lot, and I don't have it. Because constantly I get distracted by the baubles. And I think, oh, well, that's always there. I can go to that at any time. I feel like St. Augustine. St. Augustine, who was a bit of a live wire when he was young, said, make me chaste, God, but not yet. And that's how many of us feel. Yes, give me pure, holy asceticism. Give me a life completely devoted to the pursuit of God, but not yet. There's a few other things I want in the meantime. Okay, so Jesus is a great one for exaggeration. You know, and that's very much a Middle Eastern pattern. So in the Gospels, we say, oh, well, you know, it's impossible for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven. Well, it's impossible for a camel to go through the eye of a needle, indeed. But that's very much a Middle Eastern trope, you know. I mean, the fact is, it is impossible for somebody who settles their salvation upon their physical worth or upon their social status to find the kingdom. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. But that's not what we're looking for. We're not looking to elevate our status so that we feel we don't need God. We're not looking to build up our wealth so we feel that we can fight every eventuality and don't need God. That's not what we are seeking. What we are seeking in this place, and the reason why this place is so vitally important, is the sort of transformation that has been real for us. The sort of transformation that we've seen in other people that has transformed our life. Some of that may be the high-flown rhetoric that we find in people like Martin Luther King Jr. His teachings have been an inspiration to generations across the world. But if I look at my own life, most of that has come from relatively humble individuals who have changed my life and my outlook by the way that they had become. And they haven't done it through force, and they haven't done it through bullying or hectoring. They've done it because they've changed what they wanted in life. They've changed the sort of person they were, not by doing what they didn't want to do, but by changing the things they wanted. Does that make any sense to you? My grandmother, for example, was a saintly woman. I rest upon my grandmother's example daily. My grandmother's example, her testimony of faith, her sainthood, is what I rest upon for guidance when I find myself in a difficult situation, where what I want to do is anger and condemnation, and I think of the example of my grandmother, who would never appear for the prosecution. My grandmother, who irritated the hell out of me as a child, because I wanted to be angry and say, oh, I hate this person. This person's done something awful. And my grandmother would say, well, maybe, Clinton, maybe they didn't have what you had when they were a child. Or maybe, you know, they're a very angry person by nature and they're having to fight very hard just to be civil. And, you know, she'd say things like this and it used to drive me nuts. But it shocked and surprised me. And instead of just automatically flowing into the general theme of condemnation when I grew up, I kept being pulled back a little by my grandmother, and the sayings that she said there, but for the grace of God, go on. You know. And she meant them sincerely. She was a kind woman. She was a woman who had become kind through the experiences of life. I don't know whether she was kind as a young woman. She may have been. But I do know that she had a hard life, and that hard life didn't embitter her. All through the 1920s and the Depression, when my grandfather could find no work and was so depressed that he was clinically sick and was off work for 3-4 years, she worked in the woolen mills in the north of England. And when she was pregnant with a twin, she had a bucket by the side of the loom to throw up into. so that she wouldn't have to take time off work, because she couldn't. She started work when she was 13 because her father had died. He was gassed during the war and died just after the Great War, the First World War. And the family had no money, and having been a successful music writer down in London, the whole family of 11 children and mother went up to Yorkshire so that the girls could find work in the woolen mill. She had a very hard life, and yet she was this saint. And because she had sought the gold in everything that was presented to her, she changed my life and those around her. Now, that's something that each of us can aspire to. And although it's not grand and dramatic, it is more effective than any high-blown rhetoric that we may want to do, than any evangelical preaching on the street corner, than any condemnation of sinners. It's far more effective to seek to want the good. Not to force ourselves into being something we're not, but to seek to become something that wants these things. To seek to become the sort of person that wants kindness. To seek to become the sort of person who doesn't condemn at first opportunity. To seek to become the sort of person that when you hear of someone in jail doesn't immediately say, oh, they must have deserved it. Because it's easier to believe that. It's easier to believe that anybody who is in a position of oppression brought it upon themselves. We don't have to challenge our own theories of life and living if we believe that. It's easier to watch a film like Selma and say, to try and put the oppression on the oppressed and absolve the oppressor. Because we do not then have to re-examine our whole society, in which we often find a fairly comfortable place. But we must seek to become the sort of person who wants justice, who wants truth, and is willing to risk ourselves for it. Because then we ourselves, without being huge figures on the public stage, will transform others. And in transforming others, in ways that we may not get to feel proud of and get the benefit of, we may never know about it. But we just have to trust in God that compassion, that kindness, that wholeness, that truth, and that justice will do their work even if we don't see it being done ourselves. And that when we choose to not appear for the prosecution, and when we choose to build a community that will not appear for the prosecution, that will not condemn, that will not curse, that will not cast aside, that will not abandon, that will not disapprove, that will not tut under our breath, that will not find reasons why oppression is justified. When we build that sort of community, and we have the groundwork for that sort of community in Metropolitan community churches, but more precisely here and now, then it echoes outwards like ripples in a pond. If each one of us interacts with 100 people a week, and that's a bare minimum, and we do something different, we do something startling, we do something a little odd, those are seeds that are planted in the ground. Now, it also means that each of us will undergo a startling change, which can be very uncomfortable. When a seed is planted in the rich earth, something startling and disturbing happens to it. If it is only interested in being a good seed, it is going to be startled when it bursts asunder and begins to become something else. A seed cannot forever remain a seed, or it goes bad. It has to start to grow and become a growing, living plant. And it has to be immersed in the dirt before it can be there. We have within ourselves extraordinary potential. But that greatest potential is loving kindness. And loving kindness spreads outwards and changes lives. This community, we are building into a community of loving kindness. And that, my dear people, is sufficient. So let us support this community. That's what stewardship comes down to, really. We have to know what we're supporting. We have to expect appropriate things, not expect another thing that will distract us. You know, sometimes people look to church to be this huge, grandiose thing which will distract them from the business of going about their spiritual lives. Not to be the place where their spiritual lives find nourishment, but to be a distraction from it. And sometimes church is a distraction from God. It's just like going to a concert. It's like going to any of those things. So let's know what we are seeking to support. A place of subtle transformation, where we start to want the things of God. Not where we force ourselves into doing things we don't want to do, but where we start to want to do things that are those of kindness and compassion.